Welcome to worship with the Universalist Unitarian Church in Peoria. My name is Reverend Jennifer Innis. It is so good to be together today. All are welcome from all ages, all stages of life, as we live into our mission of loving inclusively, growing in mind, body, and spirit, embracing freedom, and doing all our part to help heal the world. This is a month for our theme where we are talking about living intentionally, and certainly part of that is to recognize where we come from and the resources that are around us that we have received and we are stewards of in this time. This is the ancestral home of the Peoria people. They were here and living their lives long before any of us came. I want to say something about how we sustain and support this congregation. We do this through so many opportunities of giving and of receiving, in fact. But I want to talk about the gifts that make it possible. We do time, we do skills, and so much we also make financial commitments. It is the members and friends of this congregation that are the major sustaining financial source for our ongoing lives and for our ministries that we are building to welcome those who might come after us. And we also ask for an offering during our Sunday service itself, that we recognize how the act of giving is itself an important practice and a sacred act. So I invite you in this moment to make a financial contribution. You can do so online, during the service, you can write a check and send it, in fact, all kinds of ways that you might give. Thank you so much for your gifts. Thank you so much for all that we give into making this congregation a living, breathing body for all of our days to come. I want to invite us, folks who are joining us on Zoom or even on Facebook Live, to join the conversation on Zoom after the service. We'll be having a conversation about some of the themes we talk about today. Carol Manny will be leading that conversation. And finally, I invite the congregation to be part of the search for the Director of Lifespan Religious Education. Right, we are in search. In case you didn't realize that, we are actively in search for a new Director of Lifespan Religious Education. We want to thank Amy Popp for all of her years of service, and she will be finishing up. She's agreed to stay through the rest of our congregation year, and we'll be saying goodbye to her in a great way, hopefully more in person, sometime in June. But we want to be ready and to be looking for a next religious educator. And the search team is underway, and there are cottage meetings that will be part of the process. We've already had a couple of them, and we have a couple of more this week. We'll also be sending out a survey in electronic and paper format as well. I invite you to come and be part of our search for a new religious educator. Thank you. And now let us turn to our first hymn, which is The Fire of Commitment by Reverends Jason Shelton and Mary Catherine Moore. Let us enjoy. I invite you to rise in body or spirit wherever you are and enjoy the fire of commitment.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our minds and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion each to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the stories of our living rings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Our opening words today are called "You Are Welcome Here" by Reverend Dr. Deborah Hafner. You are welcome here. If you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, or asexual, or resist labels completely, you are whole and welcome here. If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender, you are whole and welcome here. If you're confused about your sexuality, have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one, you are whole and welcome here. If you have had an abortion or an unintended pregnancy, given up a child, had a miscarriage, had AIDS or HIV, struggle with infertility or sexual dysfunction, you are whole and welcome here. If you have been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault, you are whole and welcome here. If you have made sexual decisions or had behaviors that you regret, you are whole and welcome here, and we will help you to offer restorative justice and healing. Your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are. You are whole and welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love you, and fight for your rights. We seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity.
We light this chalice today in honor of the Unitarian Universalist first principle to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person. We recognize that these are not just words to be spoken. Instead, they call us out of our comfort into an ever-deepening commitment. A commitment we make to the rights of all whose inherent worth and dignity are denied, diminished, or destroyed by systems of oppression. And they call us into the practice of looking into our hearts with courage and honesty.
Here we have gathered side by side, circle of kinship, come and step inside. May all who seek here find a kindly word. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate. as we give, we gain. Sing out in friendship this our heart's old song.
Good morning. Today we're talking about our rights and choices about ourselves and our bodies. My story today tells the tale of one special creature who learned an important lesson. It's called The Great Big Hug, adapted from Isa Abraham Ravison. This story begins with Elephant and Meerkat, who love each other and make each other happy. Every morning, Elephant gives Meerkat a great big hug, and Meerkat smiles a great big smile. But one day, Meerkat didn't smile. Instead, Meerkat let out a great big ouch! And Meerkat and Elephant both felt confused and upset. Then Elephant noticed their great big reflection in the watering hole. I'm bigger than I was yesterday. I'm so big my hugs hurt Meerkat. Maybe I've become too big to have a friend so small. Feeling very sad, Elephant ran away to look for a bigger friend to play with. Soon, Elephant saw Ostrich peacefully bird watching. Ostrich is definitely big enough to play with me without getting hurt, Elephant thought. Ostrich, guess what? It's tickle time, Elephant called, running over to Ostrich. Elephant started tickling, but instead of laughing, Ostrich hopped away and hid their head in the sand. Oh no, Elephant said. Even a great big animal like Ostrich doesn't want to play with me. Maybe no one will ever want to play with me again. I will float myself out to sea on a great big iceberg and live alone forever. And that is what Elephant did, lying on an iceberg in the middle of the ocean, feeling sad. My heart is so heavy. None of my friends like me anymore. I guess elephants are just too big to have friends. I will live my life all alone on this iceberg. Elephant wailed a great big wail. Ah! Who called my name? Asked Blue Whale in a great big voice. Shh, Blue Whale said. I'm playing hide and seek with Seagull. Hooray, thought Elephant. I found someone bigger than me. There's no way I can hurt Blue Whale. Now I can have a friend. Elephant reached out to give Blue Whale a great big hug. Stop, bellowed Blue Whale. Elephant was distraught. Nobody likes me. I'm even too big for Big Blue Whale. That's not true, said Blue Whale. I just don't like hugs is all. How about a high fin? Elephant thought about what Blue Whale said. I like hugs, but Blue Whale likes high fins and hide and seek. I wonder what Ostrich likes, or Meerkat. Maybe it's okay for us all to like and be comfortable with different things. Maybe I'm not too big to have friends after all. Elephant said thank you to Blue Whale and set off to find Ostrich and make things right. Ostrich, you clearly didn't enjoy my tickles. I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner. Is there something else you'd like to do? Elephant asked hopefully. Ostrich smiled and drew a big tic-tac-toe board, and they played until Elephant set off to find Meerkat and make things right. Meerkat was sitting all alone, but jumped up and said, Elephant, I'm so happy to see you. I was so worried when you ran off and didn't come back. Elephant said, I'm sorry I worried you, and I'm sorry I hurt you when I hugged you, and I should have asked if you wanted a hug. Meerkat said, It's okay. I love your hugs, and I love you. Can we just try a gentler hug? I didn't think of that, said Elephant. And then Elephant gave Meerkat a great big gentle hug, and Meerkat smiled a great big smile. You see, When it comes to touching other people, we need to ask first to be sure they want to be touched. Elephant learned that everyone has the right to say they don't want to be touched or don't want to be touched in a certain way, no matter how old or young they are. If we want to be touched, we have a right to ask for that too. Other people may say yes or they may say no, and both are okay. The important thing is that everyone feels comfortable with their choices. So be it.
For this lighting of candles, I want to dedicate the moment to the focus of our service, that of reproductive choice, rights, and justice. This morning, there may be stories from your life that surface in unexpected ways. I invite you into this moment, into a kind of ritual to hold that space for your story, whatever it may be. And if you need support after the service, please reach out. As I light the series of candles for the different paths we have taken, if you recognize yourself in one of these paths, I invite you to put your hand over your heart wherever you may be and know that you are not alone. Someone else in this gathered community is holding their hand over their heart as well. So let us begin. I light the first candle for those whose stories include a choice to end a pregnancy. I light this candle for all who have aborted a pregnancy or partnered with someone who in an abortion for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I light the second candle for those whose stories include the unwanted loss of a pregnancy or struggle with fertility. I light this candle for all who have traveled this path of loss for whatever reason and under whatever circumstance.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I light the third candle for those whose stories include the choice to give birth. I light the candle for those who have given birth or partnered in the birth of a child, who have adopted a child birthed by someone else, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I light the fourth candle for those whose stories include the choice not to conceive or have children. I light this candle for all who have made the decision not to conceive or bear children for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I light the fifth candle for those whose stories include a forced choice or no choice at all, or who have encountered violence where there should have been tenderness and care. I light this candle for all who have found themselves unable to exercise their own reproductive freedom for whatever reason, under whatever circumstances.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
I light the fifth, the sixth, and final candle for those whose reproductive story is still being written. I light this candle for all who are at the threshold, who have agency and choices still to make about their reproductive lives, for whatever reason, under whatever circumstance.
May the beginnings and endings in our stories be held in unconditional love and acceptance.
May the flames of these candles illumine love and compassion for ourselves, for others, and for all the stories in our human experience. I invite you now, after we have enjoyed sharing these candles, to enter into the quiet and reflection with our music for meditation. Sharing of joys and sorrows. We gather and worship and offer what is in our minds and on our hearts. In this gathering, we recognize the burdens, the struggles, as well as the celebrations and hopes that are among us. In this time of sharing, we make manifest our circle of care. May this circle grow ever wider to include all who are with us and all who are in need of such a gathering. Within our congregation, I offer a note, a wish for speedy and complete recovery to Donna Dickey. She is recovering at home following a procedure and a hospital stay. In our larger world, we have had some notable deaths this week. Among them, the comedian Louis Anderson, also the rock opera musician Meatloaf, and the Buddhist teacher and guide Thich Nhat Hanh. I know there's a joke in there somewhere. But for right now, let me offer. I think they would all enjoy each other's company very much, frankly, too. For now, I want to offer a reflection, a poem from Thich Nhat Hanh. This body is not me. I am not limited by this body. I am life Without boundaries, I have never been born and I have never died. Look at the ocean and the sky filled with stars, manifestations from my wondrous true mind. Since before time, I have been free. Birth and death are only doors through which we pass sacred thresholds on our journey. Birth and death are a game of hide and seek, so laugh with me. Hold my hand and let us say goodbye. Let us say goodbye to meet again soon. We meet today. We will meet tomorrow. We will meet at the source of every moment. We meet each other in all forms of life. Knowing that we share this meeting together in all the forms, I invite you to join with me in one more moment of quiet, that we might hold all that is within our hearts and on our minds, all that is within us and around us within the embrace of this circle of care. Let us enter into quiet together. Amen. For what is our reading today, I offer a video from the resources I received from the Unitarian Universalist Side with Love Reproductive Justice Worship Information. So I invite you to settle in and find a place where you can truly be present to this story. It is from Carolyn Boole, who talks about her experience of seeking abortion services while her family lived in Massachusetts, and how she became an organizer for health and rights in the 1970s and beyond. I include this story, and it's a little bit longer than some of our stories, but I include this story because of how she brings out the arc of the experience about reproductive justice and institutions in advocating for health and access and choice over the last, 70 years. Please join with me as we hear Carolyn's story.
Well, it was 1969. We were living in a dormitory. My children were 7 and 3, and I had had horrendous postpartum depressions after each of them. And despite using a diaphragm, I got pregnant. And it was just, I was just not willing to go through again what I had been through and to put my family through it. When I told him I just could not continue the pregnancy, he said, well, you could go to Planned Parenthood. But he said that with his back turned to me. And turns out it was not a clinic at all. It was only an educational facility. They asked me all the same questions about why I wanted an abortion and all kinds of intrusive questions. And they finally decided that they could and would refer me to the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, which I'd never heard of. So I went to see a minister at the Old South Church. I don't know what denomination it was. And he referred me eventually to a doctor in Montreal. There were 4 of us having abortions, and I was the first. I was hoping this guy was a doctor. There was a woman in a white dress and white shoes, and I was hoping she was a nurse. There was no anesthesia. My pregnancy was very early, which meant that it was more painful than it would have been a couple of weeks later. It was really painful, and I yelled, and he told me to keep quiet. And as soon as he had finished, I vomited up the soup I'd eaten. I did hear one of the women talk about having had an abortion before, and the doctor she named was my doctor who had delivered both my children. Imagine. Several months later, I again had a diaphragm failure and was pregnant again. But this time I thought, let's go the legal route. After all, I'm a school teacher. I'm a law-abiding citizen. So I called Dr. Sewell. He was agreeable, but the routine in Massachusetts at that time was you had to have a psychiatrist's approval that you would take your life if you continued your pregnancy. So I went for that appointment, which was very humiliating. I was energized. I was pretty furious about my experience. And I sought out a doctor at the Boston Lying In Hospital who was, I think, head of OBGYN. From somewhere I had the information that he was involved with a group of professional people who were planning in Massachusetts to have a counseling service to refer women to New York City once abortion became legal there in July of 1970. At the same time the New York law became legal, was implemented, we moved to Ohio. And there I very quickly got involved in an abortion rights legalization group. There were 4 organizational members of this coalition. Planned Parenthood, of course, where we met, and that was the entity that had secured the funding. The Free Clinic, the Cleveland Women's Counseling, and the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, who was represented by an African-American Episcopal priest. So we talked to women who were desperate to have an abortion and referred them either to New York, if they could afford to go, or through this routine in Ohio. In New York, there were 2 very big clinics. I mean, they were seeing women from all over the country. And the one that we referred to was called Women's Services. It was started by the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, which was a national, really kind of an undercover ecumenical group. We continued until the law changed until the Supreme Court ruling in Roe versus Wade. There was a heck of a party that night at our house.
I remember it.
You were scared because it was a packed house. Everybody just came. It was packed, and you couldn't find your mommy. We were just in disbelief. We could not believe that abortion had just become legal. Like tomorrow it's going to be legal. And it was true that very quickly abortion clinics did spring up, and very quickly we discovered that they were not offering private counseling to every patient, which we thought was very important. And they weren't giving reduced fees to anybody. And a lot of women were seeking abortions because they couldn't afford to have a child. So we decided we had to jump into the fray and have an abortion clinic.
How is that for you now, sitting where we are in this moment in history?
How it is for me is really sad. I was so determined that my daughter should never have to go through anything like I went through. And to think that we are on the cusp of being exactly there once again is just horrifying.
So what difference did it make that there was clergy involved?
I think everyone would agree with my belief that the clergy were like the good housekeeping stamp of approval. They were the legitimizing force. It means a lot to me that Reverend Bill is staunchly pro-choice, and I was just delighted to know that he was a board member of RCRC, the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. I could not belong to a church that was not pro-choice. I would hope that there are people within the church who would form a group of pro-choice people prepared to do whatever was needed. I was just listening to a podcast, and John Lewis was talking about the struggle for voting rights. And I thought how important what he said is for reproductive rights now. That the only thing that ever did work was organizing and staying organized and being unwilling to be defeated. Do not give up. You just can't. Because the pendulum will come around again. It's bound to. Because it's right.
Can I see another's woe, and not be in sorrow too? Can I see another's grief, and not seek for kind relief? Can I see a falling tear, and not feel my sorrow share? Can a father see his child weep, nor be with sorrow filled? Can a mother sit and hear infant groan and infant fear? No, no, never can it be. Never, never can it be.
January 22nd marked the 49th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, the legal decision by the United States Supreme Court that women had the right to decide whether to end a pregnancy. The concern is that next year we may not be celebrating the 50th anniversary. There is such a wave of effort to restrict abortion access. It is rising, and it is rising alongside with the effort to restrict voting, to reduce our liberties and our rights in this country. There are legal blocks. One of the most critical is in Texas, where on Thursday, the Supreme Court of our country avoided stopping the law that went into effect last September that cut off abortion access beyond 6 weeks. And letting this law continue to be in effect during the legal challenges to it. And the legal challenges are particularly difficult to organize because of how the law itself was written. And this is all by design. As I prepared for today, someone asked why address this anniversary in this year when the 50th is next year. We like round numbers for celebrations, right? But simply put, the conversation is now. The critical moment is today. Every day also, the laws that further restrict access to health care, and abortion is health care. Every day these laws are in effect. People become more desperate and are held hostage instead of knowing affirmation and respect, or at least having access to what they need to do to care for their lives and for their bodies. The good news is that people and organizations all across the country are showing up for choice and for rights and for justice. Religious organizations have been in this struggle for so long, for so many decades. And the religious bodies, the church, this church, must show up again. I know so many of us, so many of you are tired of this fight, have done phenomenal work in being advocates. You have been in it your whole lives. You thought you had accomplished the great work like Carolyn and her patriots and her peers. And the prospect of that effort being undone and the harm it's already bringing is devastating. But I'll tell you that simply having this access, this right, we've already learned how precious it is, how important it is to have choice, to have options, to have health care that we need. I grew up with the assumption of this access, with the assumption of this form of autonomy. We know, as a community, as a religious tradition, we know the preciousness of affirmation, of what happens in our society when women choose to become parents, for example, when people who can get pregnant choose whether or not to continue that pregnancy. When people who become pregnant feel affirmed in body, mind, and spirit for being able to make the choice that is best for them. When a community, we also know, when a community has access to good health care, as people have become more aware of that fact, after some communities, so many communities, after hundreds of years of marginalization, we know how important it is to be able to strive to improve life and their own and that of their neighbors. So as a people of this faith, we know what has been preached all along, that of sacred body and sacred choice, and how that has a profound impact on all of us. And those of us in liberal, progressive, even moderate traditions need to claim the conversation again. The religious voice really matters here. The theology that calls for love speaks to everyone. It also speaks to the entirety of the human experience. Those of us in religious traditions have an opportunity to claim the moral ground and not cede it to those who would narrow it and cause harm to others. It matters to all of us, for folks who are white and middle class, for folks who are impoverished, for folks who are Black, Indigenous, people of color, trans people, anyone who can become pregnant, and the people who can't. The people who don't want to. The people in their lives as well. It is reproductive choice, reproductive health, and reproductive justice. My colleague, Reverend Greta Seidel, sums it up. That reproductive justice means more than abortion access. It means a commitment to the spectrum of choices for the whole diversity of humankind. I think that's a good thing to realize as we live into our universalist tradition that says there is a big love and a big world, and we are all part of it. It is to be committed to a pregnant person's right to choose as a defense of democracy and as an act of faith. And Unitarian Universalism has been showing up for this for such a long time. 10 years before Roe versus Wade, the Unitarian Universalist Association officially supported the legalization of abortion in cases of rape, incest, threat to the mother, physical and mental defect of the child, or other compelling reasons. This was in the 1960s that a denomination, a tradition in this country made this public declaration. The language and our understanding have changed a little bit over time, but make no mistake, this was a notable declaration of priority and human rights. These efforts led to the clergy consultation service, as Carolyn Bull talked about. It was honest-to-goodness help from religious leaders working with doctors to help people who were pregnant make a different choice. I can only imagine the power of the decision of Roe versus Wade in 1973. I mean, Carolyn just touches on that a little bit in her response of, wow, this really actually happened. I have to offer a note of thanks to the Women's Alliance at First Unitarian Church in Dallas because they were working with the people who were involved with this case. They were support for folks who put it together, including the woman known as Jane Roe, who made a case and made the legal argument that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. But of course, we know that's not the end of the story, that decision. Because as soon as that decision was handed down, people who didn't want that access started to strategize to reverse it. They were playing a long game, which we are feeling the brunt of right now. And knowing this, the faith leaders of that time in 1973 and after formed the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice to preserve abortion access. But even this work has evolved over time as well. In the early 1990s, Black women created the term reproductive justice because the white feminism, the white women's rights movement, and other rights movements were not speaking to the needs of Black women who also were trying to honor race and class as well as gender. As author and teacher Bell Hooks, the Black feminist we heard about last Sunday, as she pointed out and as she was encouraging women to speak to Black feminism, Black women have a particular trauma and legacy of oppression that combines race and gender and class. And we receive the benefit of that wisdom in this call to reproductive justice. It's concerned not only with the legally protected access to abortion, but the far broader needs for health that have an impact on the entire community. It's the people have a right to not have children. There's 4 elements to it. First, the people have a right to not have children. The people have a right to have children. The people have a right to raise the children they do have in a safe and healthy environment. And every person has a right to health and self-determination regarding their bodies and their sexuality, free from oppression and shame. It is straight up bodily autonomy. To have children, to not have children, to raise the children they have in a safe and healthy place, and bodily autonomy. Those are the core principles of reproductive justice. And our larger Unitarian Universalism has taken up this call for reproductive justice as well. In 2015, there was a statement of conscience that included the saying, "The Unitarian Universalists support gender equity, positive sexuality, diverse sexual expression, and the individual right to make reproductive choices. Such choices are influenced by social and political systems, as well as factors like racial and cultural identity, economic status, immigration, citizenship, relationship, health, and ability. Our religious tradition directs us to respect the diversity of faith traditions around us and insist that no particular religious viewpoint or creed guide the policies of our government. In short, we uphold the range of the human experience and not have any one dogma or creed determine our government and our health." And as a Unitarian Universalist who grew up in this tradition, this is the core of the message I received as a child. This is what we were doing. This is how we were showing up. I grew up with the previous incarnation of our sexuality education program about your sexuality, and one of the core books was Our Bodies, Ourselves. And even if I'd never read the contents of the book, which I did all the time, just the title was affirming that our bodies, ourselves. It transformed me again and again, and still does when I see it. We as a tradition are showing up by including our whole lives in our religious education program this year, the comprehensive sexuality education offered by the UUA and the United Church of Christ Homeland Ministries. It begins, each of these programs begin with honoring the self, one's relationships, learning about others, and learning about respect for our bodies and for consent. We show up as a religious tradition by creating a sexuality education program that serves in a secular world and is not tied to any one faith tradition. The point is, in all of this work, is not to convert people to our beliefs or the same beliefs, but to make options available to live into this call for justice. Because, make no mistake, what's also in place is a threat to democracy, is a threat to our choices in our society in general. We want a freedom of choice rather than being run by a minority that doesn't count large numbers of our population as actual people, as we keep hearing from our leaders in so many ways. This is a systemic attack that has been happening for 50 years. It demands a systemic response. We who believe in freedom need to show up. And we need to be this place and this people such as us to do so, because collectively we have the power and the privilege to do so. We have obligation and we have opportunity. The obligation is as part of fulfilling our ongoing study of and service related to the effects of oppression, especially racism and sexism and class. We have the opportunity by showing up and just simply engaging in the conversation about abortion, about reproduction, about honoring the body, which is itself countercultural to so much of the messages in our society. We show up for economic and our emotional concerns, gender and sexuality needs, disability-related respect, and so much more. Remember, as Sonia Renee Taylor tells us, the body is not an apology. This is true for each and every one of us. It is true for our neighbors. It is true for those we will never know. The work of this showing up, of advocating for justice in all its forms, is practice. This work is sacred, it is special, it is holy, it is precious. It is for each of us, because what each of us does matters. We show up with a theology that affirms the holiness of each person, living the reason we speak, encouragement to spiritual growth, promoting inherent worth of every person, and advocating for a more democratic world, and acting from a sense of radical interconnection. We are living into being a sacred body and exercising a sacred choice. Because we are so sacred. Each of us, is loved. So I invite you to join me. Let us bring that action and that presence and that holiness into the world. Amen. And now, I invite us to enjoy our final hymn, I Know I Can, by Jeannie Gagne.
Though days be dark with storms and burdens weigh my heart, the troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go when sorrow heaves my soul and burdens make me strong. The troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go on. My cousin in my heart, my neighbor in my soul. The troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go. And though the journey is long, the destination is near. The troubles wait at every turn, I know I can go. So cousins, take my hand, and neighbors, sing my song. When hope awaits at every turn, I know we will go on.
Knowing how quickly the flame of truth may be extinguished, how easily the chalice of fellowship can be broken. Let's be vigilant in our faith, keep peace in our hearts, and make care for one another the watchword of our lives together, so our light goes out everywhere into the world.
As we enter into another week in this wacky world, let us remember there is only one side, and that of humanity and of the earth itself. May we pray for peace. May we raise our voices with our elected officials and engage as we can in acts of resistance. And may we remember to take such very good care of ourselves, each other, and those we love. May we remember the words from the Unity Prayer. The light of love surrounds us. Love enfolds us. The power of love protects us. Love watches over us. Wherever we are, love is. Our worship is ended. Let our service begin.